Hi everyone, welcome to Extra Credit, and today we're going to be talking about generalization. So generalization is what happens when we make broad, sweeping statements about something and ignore the finer details. So for example, I could say that generally speaking, grade 8 students don't really do healthy things anymore like reading books and exercising, they just bum around and watch Netflix all day long. But we know that's not really fair at all. I mean, you guys do way more than just watch Netflix all the time. You also watch TikTok, YouTube, Disney+, Instagram, Snapchat. So when we talk about history, we immediately encounter a pretty big problem, and that is that so much has happened in the past that it's impossible to capture all the details. So to deal with this, historians end up doing a lot of generalization. That means that they summarize the main ideas of what was going on in a certain time period while ignoring the little things. Now, as we saw last time with periodization, this kind of general approach can be really useful because it helps us get a big picture idea of what certain times and places in history were like. So for example, we can say that the ancient Greeks in general loved competition, as is shown through lots of their myths, and also the fact that they literally invented the Olympics. Or we can say that the Romans were generally violent and bloodthirsty, as is shown by the fact that their favorite kind of entertainment was watching people die in horrible ways. Yeah, good thing we're totally not into that anymore. But the problem is that, like periodization, generalization also has some pretty major drawbacks. The main one being that historical generalizations are just as often false as they are true. When you're dealing with something as vast and complex as human history, there's just no way that broad statements can capture the full complexity of the reality. So let's take the Middle Ages for example. The Middle Ages are a time period of history that's usually said to stretch from about 500 AD to 1500 AD and cross the entire continent of Europe. Now, just let that fact alone sink in. That's 1,000 years of history from Ireland to Istanbul and everything in between. The sheer enormity of the time and space involved here should be a pretty big clue that any generalizations that we make about what life was like during the Middle Ages are going to be highly suspect. And to prove it to you, let's talk about one of the most famous aspects of the medieval world: peasants. Now, we all know that peasants were at the bottom of the social structure of the medieval world, and that they were basically just a mass of poor, miserable farmers struggling to get by. They worked, went to church, got sick, died young, and sometimes spoke out bravely for democratic reform.
Help! Help! I'm being repressed!
But you might be surprised to learn that this picture of peasants is highly misleading, as I myself learned when I picked up a great book by Ian Mortimer called A Time Traveler's Guide to Medieval England. Now, in this book, Ian Mortimer takes us on a journey of what life was like in 14th century England for the people who actually lived there. And what makes it so interesting is that instead of generalizing, he helps shed light on the medieval world by narrowing in on a certain time and place. And as it turns out, according to Mortimer, the people that we call peasants in medieval England would have been really confused if they heard us use that term, and not just because we speak modern English and they spoke Middle English. It's because peasants, as we think of them, didn't exist. Instead, the lower classes were made up of all kinds of people of varying wealth and status and freedom, and they were all very different from each other. So for example, on top you had the yeomen or the franklins, who might own up to 30 acres of their own farmland, which they could farm with their own teams of oxen. Then there were freeholders who had less land than a yeoman or a franklin, and sometimes in a bad year might even have to sell part of their land to a yeoman in order to make ends meet. And then on the very bottom you had the villeins, who weren't even free at all, but they were bound by law to serve a certain lord until they died. Every week a villain had to farm the lord's land for a certain number of days, and then in their time off they could at least go and relax by farming their own land. Oh well, at least they didn't have very much of it. And then sometimes a yeoman or a franklin could raise their status even further by renting a lord's estate and then managing the estate as if he was the lord himself. So this idea of peasants is a whole lot more complex than we thought, and if you called them that, they'd probably be pretty offended, if they could understand what you were saying. And that's just 1 century in one place. I mean, imagine what happens if we broaden our scope even further and compare England in the 1300s to Germany in the 600s or Spain in the 900s. The complexity never ends. And this is why when we study the past, it's so important to get specific and to try to get inside the skin, not literally, of the people that we're studying. We have to walk in their shoes, breathe their air, see the world through their eyes. Although you wouldn't probably want to breathe the air of a medieval city because it'd probably kill you. On that note, I just read another great book called 24 Hours in Ancient Rome, in which the author takes us on a tour of what daily life would have been like in Rome itself for 24 regular citizens who lived there, everybody from slaves to senators. Now, as we already noted, there's this common assumption out there that the Romans were bloodthirsty and vicious, and that they didn't place a whole lot of value on human life. And that's not a wholly unfounded assumption. After all, in both ancient Greece and Rome, child mortality rates were so high that children weren't even considered full human beings until at least a week or so after their birth, when their father formally accepted them into the family. Up until that point, it was considered completely legal and acceptable to leave a child alone in the streets or the wilderness to die, or be taken by somebody else as a slave. But in one of the chapters of this book, the author describes a hypothetical Roman mother as she anxiously cares for her sick baby and tries to help him recover from a mysterious illness. You can really feel her grief as she watches her child die and she's powerless to stop it. Now, you could say that this is just a piece of imaginative fiction, and you might be right, but it's based on reality. And to prove it, the author actually quotes a couple of real tributes that Roman parents made in honor of their dead children. Take this heartbreaking example. This girl was just that many days from finishing her 6th cold winter. May the soft turf cover her fragile bones, and lie lightly upon her, earth. She was never heavy on you. Now, if that doesn't bring a tear to your eye, then I don't know what will. Now, this of course doesn't mean that the Romans were all daisies and roses. They of course still loved their blood sports just like we do nowadays. But it does show that they were tender, sensitive, and deeply human, just as we imagine ourselves to be. Which is why we need to be careful about painting the past in broad strokes. We're bound to cover up some of the beautiful, intricate, complex details. So in conclusion, I'm not trying to say that all generalizations are bad. After all, that statement itself is a generalization. Broad statements about the past are still very useful in helping us get the feel and the flavor for a certain historical era. But we have to remember that the past is always more complicated than any simple statement can sum up. After all, as we said in the very first episode, history is anything that has ever happened to anyone, anywhere. And even though it's completely impossible to get our heads around that much complexity, we should at least try to see as much detail as we can to keep us from getting too comfortable with easy answers and simplistic judgments. The end result might be that your opinions become a little less certain and your mind a little more open. And generally speaking, that's a good thing. Hey everyone, thanks for watching this episode. As always, it's a great time making this show, and I hope some of my past students are watching these and enjoying these as well. Your challenge for this week is to figure out if King Arthur was actually a real historical person. As always, stay safe, have fun, remember to play outside every once in a while, and we will see you next time.